Chapter 21 of The House on the Downs by Gladys Edson Locke. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Another victim. Mark, with the presage of something evil upon him, leaned out across the window ledge. Through the grange, doors were opening and excited voices calling out. At first, Mark saw nothing amiss in the gardens, now ominously silent. But as his gaze stretched to the white outlines of the summer house, he saw the muscularly built figure of a man detach itself from the covert of the shrubbery and start running toward the house. Mark, as he had done a few nights before, swung himself over the window ledge onto the sloping roof below, and thence climbed hastily down the ivy-clad eastern wall of the grange, using the sturdy vines as a sort of rope ladder. As he dropped upon his toes on the terrace, he saw the man who had run up from the summer house leap upon another man who was hurrying away from the terrace in the direction of the beech woods. The two grappled in a hand-to-hand struggle, and the slimmer man, though fighting savagely, went down under the blows of his antagonist. Mark started toward them, then stopped appalled at what lay on the stone platform a few feet beyond. The struggle on the garden path ceased abruptly, and the thick-set fellow, leaving his adversary lying apparently unconscious, hastened toward the terrace. As he sprang up the steps, Mark, with surprise and relief, recognized him as Detective Inspector Burton. "Another bad business, Mr. Brandon," he panted, "but I've got the scoundrel red-handed this time. Had to choke him into submission." The front door was opening with a grinding and groaning of bolts, and the bright light streaming out from the hall where the electricity had been switched on shone full upon a cloaked, recumbent figure on the terrace, and a face of deathly pallor. Sir Quenton, fully dressed even to collar and tie, showing that he had probably not been to bed at all, stepped agitatedly onto the terrace, staring aghast at the supine form at his feet. "Eve!" he shuddered. "Eve!" The electric light, contesting curiously with the silver rays of the moon, revealed with pitiless clarity the evidences of tragedy. The cloak had slipped from Eve's shoulders, displaying a slowly widening patch of crimson, staining her silken frock around and below the left breast. She lay with her face upward to the light, her eyes half open, her lips slightly parted. The golden hair, very little disordered, made a beautiful frame for the marble-white face, lovely still, in spite of the look of mingled horror and amazement stamped on the small, perfect features. A smart little Paris hat and a Gladstone bag lay near her. Sir Quenton dropped on his knees, gently raising the pathetic form. "Quick, get some brandy, Mark," he bade. "She is breathing, and have a doctor summoned at once." "There is brandy in this little flask. Put it between her lips," a woman's cool, efficient voice directed. The new parlour-maid held out a tiny silver flask. As Sir Quenton took it from her hand, Eve gave a convulsive little tremor, a faint sigh escaped her lips, and the golden head pressed heavier against the baronet's supporting knee. The parlour-maid laid a sympathetic hand on Sir Quentin's shoulder. "It is over," she said gently, and then added to Mark's astonishment, "I can never forgive myself. I knew there was danger tonight, but I thought it was concentrated within the east wing and could not escape. I had the only exit I know of guarded and the hall door locked, but there must be a way out we have not discovered yet." Sir Quentin lifted his face, haggard and old in the moonlight. "Why did Lady Eve come out here at this unusual hour?" The parlour-maid did not answer. Instead, she stooped and picked up by its stained blade an ugly-looking knife with ivory handle that lay half concealed by the folds of Eve's cloak. Sir Quentin stared in horror at that knife. The servants and other members of the household in hastily donned apparel were trooping out excitedly onto the terrace. Mr. Elphick, in fussy disarray, his usually meticulously parted gray hair literally on end, backed away from the parlour-maid, his near-sighted eyes blinking affrightedly behind his spectacles set awry on his nose. "God bless and save us! What a nasty object! Put it down, Jenkins, at once!" The parlour-maid obeyed, replacing the knife almost precisely in its former position. Fazenda Lee, in a red silk negligee, with the great mass of her black hair swinging over her shoulders, crossed the terrace and stood by Sir Quentin, her eyes dark wells of pity. "Let us carry Lady Eve into the house," she suggested gently. Detective Inspector Burton voiced curt objection. "The body mustn't be moved, miss, till the coroner has viewed it." "The coroner? "Dear, dear," ejaculated Mr. Elphick, "but this is not nice, not at all nice, and it is very hard for you, Quentin," he added worriedly. "Isn't there something I can do to make things easier for you? I'd willingly do anything, anything." Sir Quentin looked kindly at the anxious little man. "There is nothing. Thank you, Cousin Theophilus. Fazenda," he seemed to turn instinctively to her, "perhaps you will stay here with me until Dr. Petherton comes." The butler, at Burton's command, was already telephoning for the physician and the coroner. Mr. Elphick bridled. "I can stay with you, Quentin, quite as well as Fazenda. In fact, it is more proper, so to speak, eminently more proper, that I should. I am a relative. Fazenda is not." "Just as you wish, Cousin Theophilus," the baronet acquiesced dully. "I will stay too, if I may," suggested Fazenda. "Please do," said Sir Quentin gratefully. The little naturalist's mild eyes held a jealous gleam, but he said nothing further. "Where is Mr. Alwyn Rotherdene?" Detective Inspector Burton asked abruptly. "My brother," Sir Quentin said vaguely. "I don't know. Possibly in his laboratory. He often works there late." Burton addressed a footman, still conventionally imperturbable even in the face of tragedy. "See if Mr. Rotherdene is in his laboratory." The footman looked inquiringly at Sir Quentin, and the baronet nodded assent. Detective Inspector Burton turned sourly to the parlour-maid. "I heard you were in on this case, but you overstepped your province, you know, in picking up that knife. Should have left it to the coroner." She regarded the detective unconcernedly. "I had my reasons for doing so, and I shall endeavour to make my peace with the coroner." Burton continued to scowl. "Well, we haven't either one of us much to boast of with a murder pulled off under our noses, but at least I've got the man red-handed. Caught him as he was stealing off to the woods." "If you have caught the fiend who terrorizes the Grange, you are indeed to be congratulated," said the pseudo-parlour-maid. "Oh, I've captured him right enough, and he'll lie quiet for an hour or so. He got a bad thump on the head when he fell. Come and have a look at the bird. I never believed he'd gone far away." While Jenkins followed Burton into the gardens, Fazenda sent the servants back to their rooms. Mrs. Carswell was in a state of collapse. Cynthia Melsom, too, seemed considerably shaken by Eve's tragic death, and more particularly, Mark fancied, by Sir Quentin's announcement that the pseudo-new parlour-maid was in reality the well-known private detective, Mercedes Quero, whom he had engaged a few days before to solve the murder that hung over the Grange, and who had preferred to work incognito. Burton, with the aid of a manservant, carried his unconscious captive up on the terrace. Sir Quentin started back in horrified astonishment when the detective flashed his bull's-eye lantern on the face of Rodney Sherrod. "There is some terrible mistake," he declared. "That boy is incapable of murder, and in addition, he was devoted to Lady Eve." "Not a bit of it," insisted Burton. "I was down in the gardens watching for trouble which I expected tonight, when I heard her ladyship scream. I was too far away from the terrace to see what was happening, but I ran here as fast as I could. When I got to the steps, I saw that damned gypsy sneaking off to the woods, going to make tracks over the downs, no doubt. But I got him, and he was an ugly customer, too." Sir Quentin passed a shaking hand across his eyes. I won't believe that the boy I brought up in my home and educated and loved is guilty of this awful crime." "Gypsies are a bad lot," said Burton uncompromisingly, and entirely regardless of Fazenda Lee's presence. "They're never to be trusted. I've had dealings with 'em before. Now what do you want done with this blighter, sir, till the coroner and doctor get here? He's in need of a bit of attention. I had to handle him roughly." "Take him up to his room," directed Sir Quentin wearily. "Will you show them where it is, Fazenda? And then come back. Bring some warm wrap, dear girl. It's chilly out here." "No need at all for Fazenda to come back," protested Mr. Elphick. "But I suppose you must have her. Now I'm going to get you a coat, Quentin. You'll catch cold, I know." A few minutes later, Dr. Petherton arrived in his battered little runabout. While he was making an examination of Eve's body, Sir Quentin, having finally persuaded Mr. Elphick to stop fussing over him and return to bed, followed Fazenda Lee onto the south terrace. The Romany was looking across the gardens and the sloping parkland to the moon-flecked waters of the English Channel. She turned sharply at the sound of Sir Quentin's step. In one hand she held a square white envelope. "Fazenda," he began, "have you any idea why Eve came out on the terrace in her hat and cloak, and carrying a traveling bag? Was she going away?" The gypsy's eyes were lustrous with compassion. "I am afraid she was." "Alone? or with someone?" His voice tortured. Fazenda hesitated. "Perhaps this letter will explain. I found it on the telephone stand in the upper hall when they were carrying Rodney to his room. It is addressed to you in Lady Eve's handwriting." The baronet tore open the envelope and, striking a match, read the few lines enclosed. "Quenton, remarriage between us is impossible. I want to get away forever from this evil old house and every memory connected with it. Do not think it your duty to seek me out. I am going with Lord Mostyn, and this goodbye is final. Eve." The match, flaring up before its flame went out, burned Sir Quentin's fingers, but he did not appear conscious of it. "Mostyn must be sent for and questioned," he said sternly. "Who is that coming up from the park, Fazenda? Is it he, Mostyn?" Fazenda looked where he indicated. The man was coming rapidly along a garden path toward the Grange, and the moonlight caught him for a second. "I think it is Mr. Rotherdene," she said. "Alwyn in the gardens at this hour?" Sir Quentin muttered uneasily. He waited in silence for his brother. The younger Rotherdene's face, as the light from the French windows fell upon it, showed no less white and grim than Sir Quentin's. Yet presumably he knew nothing of Eve's death. "Where have you been, Alwyn?" Sir Quentin's voice was harsh and peremptory. Rotherdene gave a hard laugh. "I've been driving a damn poacher off the grounds. What's up, old man?" He stared curiously at Fazenda, a tweed ulster thrown over her negligee and her hair falling in a black cascade about her shoulders. "Has our ghost broken loose again? I heard a scream from this direction, but I was close on the heels of the poacher, so I did not stop to investigate." "Well, what's wrong? Out with it, old chap." Sir Quentin, ignoring the question, studied his brother's face. "Are you sure the man you followed was an ordinary poacher, and nothing more?" "He was a damned scoundrel," Rotherdene suddenly blazed forth. "See here, Quentin, I believe the truth is best in this case. It's high time you took a firm hand. The man was Mostyn. He was hanging about the summer house, waiting for someone. Eve, if you want my opinion. When he heard that scream and saw me coming, he made off through the park into the woods. I trailed the blighter, but lost track of him somewhere in the woods. Mostyn wants a rawhiding. He means more trouble for you, Quentin." The baronet continued to scrutinize his brother's features. "Where were you when that scream occurred?" "Almost at the summer house. Now what the devil are you so mysterious about? Hang it all, what did that scream mean? Did our ghost frighten you, Fazenda?" Sir Quentin passed his hand across his brow. "It was Eve who screamed. She was stabbed through the heart on the terrace under the east wing. She died in my arms a few minutes later." Rotherdene uttered an inarticulate cry. His dark face became ghastly. It was evident that he was fighting for self-control. "Have you any clue to the murderer?" he asked at length. "I don't know," said Sir Quentin wearily, deep riven lines showing about his eyes and mouth. "Rodney is back. Burton, the Scotland Yard man, saw him near the terrace directly after Eve screamed, and he persists in regarding the boy as a suspect. But I won't believe him guilty." Rotherdene's black brows drew together. "What does Rodney have to say for himself?" "Nothing as yet. He is unconscious from the blow on the head given him by the detective. Alwyn," his voice growing sterner, "there is a question I must ask you. A few days ago you bought yourself a new dissecting knife, with an ivory handle which had a curious Egyptian emblem upon it?" "I did. What of it?" Sir Quentin replied by another question. "When did you last see that knife?" "This evening at 8 o'clock, when I went out of my laboratory." "Did you lock the door?" "Yes, I always do, and carry the key on my person. Now what the devil do you mean by these questions?" Sir Quentin drew out a handkerchief and touched his forehead. "Eve," he said in a blank voice, "was stabbed with a dissecting knife having an ivory handle ornamented with an Egyptian emblem." End of chapter 21.